I think really where we can start to have this conversation on an important level, and what I'm trying to do on college campuses and through screens on social media every day, is not just the fight to make abortion illegal, but also to make it unthinkable culturally, to know that we all, moms and dads and babies alike, deserve so much better than the hollow lies of the abortion industry, than the death that accompanies it, not just for the babies, but putting moms' lives at risk every single day as well. And just from a human rights perspective, this is the biggest human rights issue of our time, so it demands moral clarity from our leadership.
All right, I hope you had a great weekend. This is already kicking off an amazing thing. The March Madness has started. I hope you got your brackets out there. But March Madness, political season, is in its full swing as well. Trump, in his speech in Ohio, talks about a bloodbath, something that every candidate in the media talks about all the time. I mean, Obama said it. Biden has said it. The media has said it ad nauseum. And he makes a comment in context of the auto industry not succeeding if he's not reelected, and they freak out. Dennis Prager is going to be with us tomorrow. I really want to break it down with him. Isabelle Brown's going to join us in just a bit. She'll talk about what's happening with Gen Z and how important they are to this election. But first, as I mentioned, big deadline again this Friday. 70% of the government, including the military, is at stake to be funded for 2024. We're talking about last year, by the way, not even this year. There's a big disparity between what the White House and Dems want and the Republicans for Department of Homeland Security funding. This is going to be something to watch. They've always seemed to solve the problem. This one's going to be a little interesting because there's a big problem, and I think House Republicans are not willing to cave when it comes to the security issue. But it really does affect the military this time, which is going to be different. And I do that. I want to play you, though, a clip. The Sunday shows were a disaster. It was like Kristen Welker of Meet the Press and Martha Raddatz this week were trying to outdo each other for who could, spew Democratic talking points more and hate on Trump the most. But this one clip from Nancy Pelosi caught my eye. I want to show it to you.
It's curious to me to see Netanyahu talk the way he does when he tried to interfere in American elections. But that's another subject. When he came to the Congress, criticized the president of the United States.
Watch this.
Barged into our country.
Barged into our country. Barged into our country. Prime Minister Netanyahu barged into our country. He was invited to address a joint session of Congress. But if he had come through the southern border, he'd be a newcomer. Language matters, folks. We talk about that a lot on the show, but just notice that he barged into our country. Newcomers come in through broken fences in the southern border. Interesting. But anyway, our friend Isabelle Brown is here with us today. She's going to break down how important Gen Z is to the election, plus this whole TikTok situation. It's not a ban. I know how to say that really well, don't I? But before I get to that, I do want to tell you about two of the amazing sponsors that keep this show free and supported. Let's have a listen to them before we get into it with Isabelle Brown. When things go south and there's a crisis, whether it's for a day, a week, a month, maybe even months, will you be ready? I am, because I got the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. And if you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer, you can join me in getting one of these. The best part about the Patriot Power Generator 2000X is that when something happens, you lose power for whatever reason. Maybe it's an attack on the grid. Maybe it's a natural disaster, whatever. You will be ready. You can plug in your refrigerator, your tablets, your medical devices, your computer, your phones, so that you, your family, and your loved ones are taken care of during a crisis. Think about how important that is. Here's what makes the Patriot Power Generator 2000X different. It runs off solar power, and the panels come free with it. You put it out, it charges the generator. Then when you bring the Patriot Power Generator into your house, there's no fumes, there's no noise. You plug into one of the several ports that exist, and you can bring it back outside. No gas, no smells, no fumes, no additional things to do. This is securing your future for you, your family, your friends. Go to 4patriots.com/Spicer and join me by getting a Patriot Power Generator 2000X to be ready when emergencies occur. If you're a long-time watcher of the show, you know about my friend Leo Grillo. Leo is the founder of Delta Rescue, and you can see a lot of the work they do at deltarescue.org. Leo started his journey by rescuing a Doberman. He named the Doberman Delta, which stands for Dedication and Everlasting Love to Animals. That became part of a lifelong mission. He founded Delta Rescue. It's a lifelong no-kill sanctuary, not a shelter, a no-kill sanctuary where dogs, cats, horses can roam freely and get the nutrition and veterinary care that they need. It's all supported by people like you and me through our contributions, $5, $10, $100, $1,000. Whatever you can do, if you're an animal lover, helps keep Delta Rescue going. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you can see some of the amazing videos of the work that they do. But also at deltarescue.org is the estate planning kit. If you can help make Delta Rescue part of your estate, that'll make Leo's mission an enduring one that continues well beyond all of us and the here and the now. So if you're an animal lover, please go to deltarescue.org, help in the short term with a contribution, but then also make it part of your estate planning kit. Isabelle, we're 24 hours out from the book. Congratulations on another successful one. I know what it's like. It's sort of, well, you describe. Are you feeling excited?
I am so excited. And Sean, it's so great to be back with you. Such a familiar, friendly face and getting the word out there about this project. We were just talking before we started the show, but it feels like you work on these forever and ever and ever. And then the day finally comes and it's like, but will anyone read it? That's the big scary part of being an author.
You know what? I tell you what, I'm going to just listen. Let me impart a little wisdom on you. People would always say to me, Sean, I bought your book and I haven't read it yet. And I'd say, I don't care. See, this is where the capitalistic priorities are different. I don't really care if you read it. I just want you to buy it.
Amen. So, well said.
Just remember that. People were like, one person I know came up to me and said, hey, I'm next in line to get your book at the library. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to talk to you.
Do that.
Don't go to the library. No one goes, buy the book, for goodness sakes. I got kids. You know what is interesting, though? My wife and I were having an interesting discussion over the weekend with a neighbor in passing about our majors and whether we're using them or not, because her kid is going off to college. And this is so I'm getting ready for our interview and I'm reading all the stuff on the book. And this is what it says in the Amazon bio. Isabelle Brown is a Gen Z conservative voice with a bachelor's in biomedical sciences from Colorado State University and a master's in biomedical sciences and policy and advocacy from Georgetown. Whoa. And my wife and I, like I said, we were talking to our neighbor about what her son may or may not go to college to do. And I'm thinking to myself, like we were joking, her degree is in art history, to which let's just say she's not using that. I at least have a degree in government, so I can say that I've played a little. Tell me what biomedical services, then you double down at Georgetown.
Oh, yeah, I sure did. I never in a million years thought I would be doing something like this for a career. I always like to say that really growing up, my favorite subject in the entire world was science, whether that was actually at school or I used to grow up going to summer camp in the mountains of Colorado where I lived. And we would do like outdoor ecology science and talk about wildlife and water quality and all kinds of stuff. Yes, it was very nerdy. Okay, but that's just who I am. It's fine. But really for me, science was always about the pursuit of objective truth, really. It was about this idea that we could have an objective reality, a fact that we could do all of the research for and ask all of the big questions about how the universe works and then come to some general consensus and conclusion about that. And I wanted to continue nerding out about this objective truth concept while helping people as much as I could. So I was pre-med in college. My dream was to be a trauma surgeon. To this day, whenever there's like a horrible injury in sports or whatever, I'm probably the only one in my family, my friend group that actually watches because it's fascinating to me. Yesterday, we were watching the SEC championship basketball game, me and my fiance, and somebody got really hurt from the University of Florida's team. And my fiance is thinking, ugh, and I'm watching the whole time like, wow, that's fascinating. So I loved that. And that's what it was all about for me. But when I was taking classes like anatomy and physiology and the dreaded organic chemistry that, yes, I'm very transparent, I had to take 3 times. Most people do. There's no shame in that. I wasn't really learning about the pursuit of objective truth anymore in science, in academia. I think COVID really pulled back the curtain for so many people all over the world that science at large isn't really about the pursuit of objective truth anymore. It's about pushing a political agenda. So we would sit in class, for example, learning about every tiny stage and miracle of fetal development for you to even be sitting in front of each other having a conversation from your growth in the womb, and then be told 6 months later, yeah, but abortion doesn't actually end a genetically unique human life. And just fire alarms would go off in my brain thinking, but what did we just learn for the last 6 months then? Or all kinds of other crazy scientific stuff. So that's really what drove my interest and piqued my interest in activism on my campus, because critical thinking really wasn't being told in the academic environment in science. But I like to say that still today, my job is to get up to pursue and tell everyone objective truth, whether that's a 15-second TikTok video, a 3-hour live stream, or going and researching something scientific for my book or anything else.
I remember in college, I had a difficult time with economics. And it was because and I didn't realize the difference between a liberal and a conservative professor at the time in the economic world. I kind of thought it was the equivalent of science, like it's economics, right? And they would say, well, with housing held stagnant, constant. And I'm like, but you can't hold it constant. I mean, it fluctuates with market forces. Like it just, to me, I knew that. I knew how much things cost. And, my dad had been dabbled in real estate a little. And I kept thinking, that's not, how can you hold a model constant and stable when they're, and it really got to me. Like I had a hard time, my mind, because I was like, you're asking me to do something that doesn't make sense. I didn't want to get down this hole, but I'm just saying, like, because this is kind of your whole, what you've delved into in terms of activism. Yeah. When you're going through this experiment in science and learning, what is the reaction of the other students? Are they having a similar reaction to you, that they're like, wait, you just told us about life and then you're discarding it. You're just telling us about chromosomes and now you're telling us, nope, don't worry about man and women. It's multiple genders.
I think for so many people, this became an exercise of memorizing rather than actually understanding what was going on. So for me, for example, I would sit in these classes and you have to memorize as much as you possibly can for the test. It was always about the test. It was always about your GPA. When you're worried about getting into medical school or PT school or dental school or whatever you want to do after graduation, your GPA has to be absolutely 100% perfect. And there's no room for error with that. So you would memorize every single thing that you possibly could that your professor was telling you specifically for the test. And so sadly, rather than exercising this idea of critical thinking and learning how to think instead of what to think, which you would at least hope for of all students on campus, science students would be the ones exercising actual critical thinking. They would just put their head down and write ferociously every single word that was coming out of the professor's mouth, instead of popping your head up to think, that sounds a little weird. There are alarm bells going off in my head. And that really was, for me, such an eye-opening, awakening experience, because I discovered quite quickly that I was kind of the only one in these big lecture halls of 300-400 people poking my head up above the crowd and saying, that doesn't really sit well with me. So I wanted to expose my fellow peers, my fellow students, to the idea that our university really wasn't doing their job in teaching us how to think instead of what to think.
All right. All that being said, let's kind of get into what's happening in DC right now. We talked last time that you were on the show about you didn't think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that there wasn't evidence of the Chinese Communist Party infiltrating U.S. data. There has been some concern about that, but let's fast forward. Based on the vote in the House, what do you think about, as this heads to the Senate, what should be done and where this thing ends up?
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been maybe the biggest story captivating my generation for the last several months. So I've loved staying up to date with all of it because there's so many moving parts. But you're right. There was a vote in the U.S. House of Representatives that honestly kind of came out of nowhere. It's a different bill with the idea of banning TikTok or like trying to force a sale than the one we've all been tracking for the last several months that originated out of the Senate, called the Restrict Act. Both I have severe problems with, but we can come back to that. Okay. And now this vote from the House is actually being tied up a bit in the Senate. So I don't know if it's going to pass the entire Congress and make its way to Joe Biden's desk. But if it does, he has confirmed he will support the bill. He will sign it immediately. Which is a big change of pace, I think. Everybody is a little surprised and shocked who aren't intimately involved in politics every day, because it kind of feels like a big pendulum swing that Joe Biden, of all people, who has been using TikTok to campaign and has been using opportunities to bring TikTokers to the White House and talk about how important their platform is and why their voice as independent creators matter, is supporting a TikTok ban, whereas Donald Trump has now come forward and said he would not be in support of this because it would only empower companies like Meta. The data question.
But here's what I think is getting lost in the discussion. It is not a ban. I mean, I have harkened back PTSD to my days at the podium when I was like, it's not a ban, but this is literally just making sure that it's not the Chinese that own it. India's had equal concerns over this. This is literally saying, great. And there are entities that want to buy it and maintain it as a U.S. company. We do this all the time with national security interests, where we ensure that other countries, particularly the ones that don't like us, that want to defeat us, can't own certain things. They can't own broadcast. I mean, it wasn't even just our enemies. Rupert Murdoch couldn't buy Fox until he became a U.S. citizen. So we do this all the time. And every one of these arguments to me falls flat. Okay, there's a bunch of people. Well, number one, if we have U.S. ownership, then nothing changes. It's just who owns it. Facebook. Okay, if you have problems with Facebook, go after Facebook. I don't have a problem. I'm not saying this is the answer to every problem, but TikTok is different. It is a tool of the Chinese government to get our data, to influence our people, to interfere with our election. The head of the director of national intelligence said they will interfere again in this election. Well, to me, all these other issues are tangential, meaning we can keep solving more problems. There's not just one issue. Why not at least solve this?
Well, first, let me just ask you, Sean, do you know much about how our data for TikTok is processed as American users of the platform already?
I know what they say, but we've already had leaks. That's a fact. It's already leaked into Chinese hands. Whether or not the government of China has access to it or not is technically unproven, although I would argue that anything that leaks into China, the government has access to. But the bottom line is, I know about Project Texas, I know about Oracle, but the bottom line is that by law, Chinese companies gain access to every entity that operates. And so ByteDance owns it. There is no question about that. And so my point is, why are we risking it? As opposed to just saying, great, you want to operate, let's do this, but let's make sure it's at least U.S. ownership.
I would love to live in this utopian opportunity where any company that's based in the United States and is owned by a United States citizen is not also selling out American data to the CCP. But I guess that argument and perspective really falls flat for me because we have countless documented examples of Meta selling your data directly to the CCP.
Okay, but see, this is again.
Hang on, though. It doesn't stop with just Meta. Airbnb is selling your data to the CCP. If we really cared about protecting Americans from the CCP, I'm having a really hard time understanding why it all falls down to this one app, that there is no documented evidence of the Chinese government really taking advantage of your email address for American citizens, but we're allowing them to fly spy balloons over our country and buy millions of acres of farmland. I guess I just have an inherent distrust of when our Congress, who can't agree on anything, even down to the definition of a woman, all of a sudden says they care about protecting Americans from China. But China has infiltrated our college campuses. China has infiltrated all of the American-based social media platforms that we use every day, who also interfere with United States elections. By the way, look at the Hunter Biden laptop story. Facebook has said they're going to censor any overtly political post going into November. If we do sell to an American company, who can afford to buy a platform that 170 million Americans and 2 billion people worldwide are using? Probably only Google or Meta, who are selling your data to the CCP. So I just find this really circular, I guess is the right word. And I don't really buy this idea that it's about our data security.
So a couple things. Number one, there are several entities. Stephen Mnuchin's putting the group. Susquehanna says that they might buy it. KKR says that they could buy it. I mean, so let's put that aside. Two, as I said at the outset, I don't think this is a silver bullet for solving problems. I agree with your concerns about Meta and Airbnb, et cetera. But that doesn't mean you don't stop one because there's others doing it. You do one, then you go to the next, you go to the next, you go to the next. I agree with you on farmland. I agree with you on the spy balloon. But I guess my point is there's something very inherently different. China's open about the fact that they are building a data profile on every single American. That's a stated goal. It is unequivocal. It's a fact. So there's a big difference.
Do they really need TikTok to do that? I mean, they manufacture all of the devices that we use every day. I'm pretty sure if they wanted our email, they already have it.
Isabelle, I say this every day on the show. I am appalled at what is going on manufacturing-wise, PPE-wise, drug-wise, yes. And that's why I'm saying I don't think this is the problem. Then you walk away. But I hear excuses and from every lawmaker about why we can't do this, this, and this, and this. So if this is just the first step, that's all I think it is, then fine. And then there's 50 other steps that need to be taken. Currency, manufacturing, labor, environmental. I agree with all of it. But I feel like every time that we come close to something, someone gives it a reason why we can't do X. This is one step. With respect to it's not just the collection of data. It is what they're doing with it. Look at what they're showing. And I know this is something that, I mean, the images, the narratives that they show Americans are not what they show in China. This is not a platform where they go, see, we just let people do this. It is being used to shape the data is one thing. The weaponization of it is another. I mean, I was going to talk to you about this, but this is a great segue. I mean, the young people now think that socialism is cool. It's got a positive rating when you ask kids about socialism versus, say, democracy or communism. What I can think of no other way than what's going on in social media that is teaching them this, that somehow it's cool to be a fan of socialism.
I am so glad you brought this up, because I think actually, data aside, which absolutely we need to be taking action against China on. I don't think there's anybody who would disagree on that from a logical and good perspective. You're very immoral if you would disagree with that. But more so on this idea of weaponizing algorithms and covertly using this Trojan horse of social media to take over American culture and change our values and our way of life. This is what I hear more often than not about TikTok. And really logically thinking about this, I'd first of all be really curious to know who we're polling to say socialism is good, because that is overwhelmingly true of millennials, but millennials are 28 years old and older at this point. Kids, Gen Zers, and this is the premise of my entire book, are actually having a massive pendulum swing in the other direction. 17-year-old boys are over 70% wildly politically conservative, the most they've been in 50 years. And if you look at exit polling from 2018, 2020, and 2022, Gen Z, only the oldest of us who can vote at this point, are trending significantly more with Republican politics, conservative ideas and values, and very conservative candidates as well. So I think socialism as a good concept is a little bit up for debate. But this weaponization concept, I hear this all the time. And my one challenge to you, and we might disagree on this forever, and that's okay. Disagreement is a good thing, is that we don't need China to use a social media platform, any social media platform, whether that be TikTok or something else, to covertly destroy American culture from the inside out by quote unquote weaponizing an algorithm. We see what happens on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, which has the biggest pornography problem, by the way, of
Twitter?
Any social media platform. It's Twitter, not
No,
TikTok,
really?
which I find fascinating. Yeah, do the research on this. It's just disgusting, to be honest with you.
Can you just explain that? But I honestly, like, I've never heard that before. When you say, do people then, is it they're tweeting a link or do they tweet photos?
Videos, photos. I mean, you can search any trending topic on Twitter, and if you scroll long enough, you will watch obscene content scrolling through. As a platform, they've said repeatedly they will not censor pornography because it's considered freedom of speech. But I mean, kids are using Twitter regularly. So this is a really frightening reality and a bigger concept in terms of what the adult film industry is doing to our country. But even outside of social media, are we not seeing what's happening inside of American classrooms with American teachers trying to trans our kids? Are we not seeing what's happening inside of the American church with American pastors saying Jesus was non-binary and reciting the Sparkle Creed on Sunday instead of adhering to our heritage as Christians? Look at what's happening inside of the entertainment industry. The number one TV show on television for high schoolers today is a show called Euphoria. I've never seen an episode. I have zero desire to, but one episode in the first season featured 30 unique penises in one episode. Look in the halls of Congress, where we have elected members of the United States government trying to legitimize and normalize Hamas, a terrorist organization, inside of the United States government. So we could go example by example, pillar of culture by pillar of culture, but we're destroying American culture from the inside out. I highly doubt we need an algorithm from China to change these cultural norms, because it's happening inside of our own borders. Maybe because of some influence from external factors or foreign adversaries, but every major president in history has said repeatedly, if America is going to fall, it's going to fall from within. And I think we're
I
seeing the
agree.
collapse of our empire because we are the ones changing our own cultural norms and accepting things like the gender transition of children, like cheering on abortion as somehow empowering to women while we slaughter millions of children on the altar of convenience. We're allowing for terrorist organizations to be empowered as legitimate governments, not just in the halls of Congress, but in the White House with our disastrous pullout from Afghanistan a few years ago. And I find it fascinating now that Congress, who's contributing largely to many of these problems, they can't even define what a woman is, as I've said earlier, is pointing the finger at the boogeyman of TikTok as the one culprit for what's destroying American culture. It feels very, look at the shiny thing over there and ignore everything we're doing in the back room.
If you're like me and you're looking to secure your financial future, I have the people for you to call. Call my friends at Bishop Gold Group at 844-984-1616 or go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, and they will sit down with you, whether it's online or over the phone, and have a conversation with you about whether it's a 401k, an IRA that you might have sitting around, or just diversifying your investment strategies into precious metals, gold, silver alike. There's a lot of buzz about these kind of groups, and I'm sure you're getting hit up by many of them. Bishop Gold Group are the people that I trust. I took my money, called them, had a conversation about how to diversify my investment strategy with precious metals. We came up with a strategy that made sense for me, and that's why I think if you want to do the same thing, you can call them. You can trust them. They know what they're talking about. They're full of integrity. And if you go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, you can join me in diversifying your investment strategy with precious metals. Like I said, in these uncertain economic times, this is a great place to diversify your investment strategy. So join me. Go to bishopgoldgroup.com/Sean, and you begin your journey with financial metals with a free promotional gift as well. Part of my issue is Congress doesn't do anything. And so if you can actually get them to agree on one step, it may be one of 100, I'll take it right now because I'm just, as I said, frankly appalled at member after member that tells me how outraged they are with China. And then it's like, and then I'm going to buy this and this and this from China. We do nothing to bring manufacturing. PPE, China sent us a virus, and then we bought all the stuff to fix it from. Then we bought all of our prescription drugs from them. And it's like, are you kidding me? I mean, we're literally rewarding the arsonist who burned down our house with a dinner. It's interesting, though. I look at the libs of TikTok, which is ironically mostly on Twitter, who, Chaya, what she does is expose all of these clips of things that are happening on TikTok. Do you think that it's effective mostly because a lot of older people aren't on TikTok and she's saying, I want to show you what your kids are seeing? I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? She takes videos and all she's doing is replaying them on a different platform for the most part and saying, see what you missed.
I think it's effective, period, because she's not creating her own narrative. She's not trying to put her own commentary on it. Chaya is absolutely amazing and so effective because she's taking what these insane people are willing to post all over the internet. Not all of her content comes from TikTok, but the name is awfully clever, isn't it? Right. People that are exposing just the most ridiculous things. There's a saying on TikTok now within our generation, bring back secrets. And I think it's really powerful because there are no secrets anymore with what some of these people are doing. They'll just tell you the most ridiculous, outrageous, off the pale things. But I think it's effective because she's just reposting them, right? And now the FBI is trying to paint her as this radical domestic terrorist who's responsible for all of these bomb threats and destroying safety of ordinary Americans. She didn't even come up with the videos. She's just reposting them, which is wild.
Do you think, I've always wondered this, but do you think that kids today, I think one of the biggest concerns I have today about my children is when I was a kid, I could screw up. I could do stupid things. And for the most part, there's not a record of it. And I always say to my kids, you have to be careful because no matter what, even if you think it's been deleted, it's not. Do you think that kids care, or do they get it when they post all this stuff? Do they think to themselves, I don't really care that it's there? Or do they recognize, or do they buy into this idea that, wow, it disappears in 60 seconds?
I don't know that the disappearing factor really matters. I mean, the idea where that came from with Snapchat isn't even really utilized in society anymore. Snapchat's been on its way out for a while. But I think there's just a big changing cultural norm in your public persona on the internet being very normal, right? Everybody kind of has two identities at this point. We have the version of us that exists through a screen, and then we have the version of us that exists outside of the screen. And ideally, we live in a world where what you see is what you get in both examples. But I think there's been so much pressure for so long, ironically, before TikTok, which I find fascinating. If we want to talk about the content on each of these platforms, the idea of an Instagram is this highly glossy, edited, perfectly curated, color coordinating brand of who you are to sell to the world. And it's so much pressure to be a picture perfect individual, picture perfect family. You're an influencer, right? If you gain enough followers and you have the responsibility to try to influence other people's lives. On the more positive side of TikTok that never gets talked about in the media, since COVID, it's been trying to expose the authenticity of real people, right? It's people sitting there saying, get ready with me and put on my makeup while I get ready to go on a date that I'm really excited for or nervous for. Or, hey, come with me to my job today and I'm going to show you what my actual day-to-day life is like. It's no filters, no editing. It's very real and tangible and raw. And I think that is such a big contrast to what internet culture really has been for the last 10 years or so, with the glossy, face-tuned, edited, perfect version of ourselves, that I like. That I think for many people in our generation, that authenticity factor is being valued far greater than the hyper edited side of things, which you see in commentary too, right? It's not these multi-million-dollar media studios that are the most effective in talking about what's going on in the world. It's independent creators like you and me sitting in the spare bedroom of our house, and stuff happens and you don't always have a script, and that's okay. The Wi-Fi might go out or something, but people value that because you're hanging out with a real person talking about real issues.
Yeah. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, independent media, but it is great to be able to say what you want, not have a bunch of lawyers and corporate overlords that say you can't cover this, you can't have this person on. You brought up abortion, and I think I was excited to have you on because I wanted to ask you, last week, Kamala Harris visited this Planned Parenthood facility. And in the lead up to it, the White House was so proud of the fact, in fact, touting the fact that this was the first time a president or a vice president ever visited an abortion clinic. It was a first.
Yeah.
And I tweeted out, I was like, this is actually sad, not proud. Like, why are you proud that you're visiting somewhere that kills Americans? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And they're proud of it. This is a first. I mean, I hope that there's a reason why it hadn't happened before, but they're doing it for a reason. And I would assume the reason is to really target a key constituency, which is younger people and younger women in particular. Is that wrong?
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right on the money. And they're trying to normalize what happens inside of the four walls of one of these buildings come all costs, even though, ironically, they'll send our first woman of color president to a location that disproportionately kills people of color and takes advantage of people of color, which is disgusting and gaslighting and the most ridiculous double standard our politicians could put us through. But actually, I think it's going to backfire if I'm totally transparent with you. There's this assumption that it is a cut and dry issue. If you are a young woman, you are pro-abortion, period, full stop, you will vote for the Democrat Party. It is much more nuanced than that. In fact, 9 in 10 Americans of all age demographics support at least some restrictions on abortion. 7 in 10 voters under the age of 35 also support some restrictions on abortion. So this narrative that the Biden-Harris administration and the DNC at large is painting of anything goes, you can kill your child up to the moment of birth, even in the process, for any reason. We're here to celebrate and shout your abortion and normalize what happens at Planned Parenthood. The vast, vast, vast majority of even their voters think that's not sitting right with me. Something is wrong with this picture.
So President Trump, in an interview this weekend, said that he said that there must be 3 exceptions, rape, incest, life of the mother being the 3, and that a 16-week ban-ish. He said that he'd be coming out with his own proposal, but that's what he's been talking about prior to the interview as the middle ground. And his point was, you can be pro-life, but you need to, if you don't get elected, it doesn't matter. He brought up Doug Mastriano losing big in Pennsylvania because he wouldn't have, as he kept saying, the 3 exceptions. When Republicans and conservatives are talking about this issue as we head into November. How do you react to what President Trump said, that we need 3 exceptions and we need to have this middle ground of 16 weeks?
I can absolutely understand where President Trump is coming from. And frankly, he's probably getting a lot of that advice from inside of the DC Beltway. This is what the polling says. This is what the data says. This is what you need to run on. But the first question I would have is, why is it always the side based in morality that needs to be the side to compromise?
Right.
And I want us to just sit with that for a moment, because the left sure as hell isn't compromising on this issue. In California, in my home state of Colorado, in Maryland, just outside of DC, the law is so vague that it actually involves a gray area that could legalize infanticide, that you could abort your child after it has been born, because that's how far these people are willing to go. They are not compromising. There's zero interest in them.
In a roundtable interview or a podcast interview towards the end of last week, Kellyanne Conway, who apparently is advising Trump on this issue, said the problem is nobody knows anybody that's come that close to an abortion, right? Her point was, she said, no one, because you only have less than 1%, according to, I think it's the CDC, where that's ever an issue. So her point was that when you say that, it's so extreme that no one knows about it. And that when Trump says that, which he brought up the Ralph Northam, the former governor and doctor in Virginia, who literally said you deliver the baby and then you decide whether you're going to keep it or not. Her whole point was, when you say that, people don't relate to it because they don't know anybody that's done that. I still think that it is the position of the Democratic Party, and they've never actually had to reconcile the views of that. But so what is an appealing argument to young Gen Zers?
Yeah, I think this idea of exceptions is interesting to talk about from my personal perspective. And I think what people from all age demographics as voters are really looking for is moral clarity on this issue, that the circumstances of your conception, whether you were conceived in rape or incest, doesn't determine the value of your personhood, that no circumstance really changes the value of that child and their unique right to exist. There are so many incredibly powerful people that were conceived in rape and placed with adoptive families, or were even raised by their biological mothers, who are talking about this issue so beautifully and eloquently in a way I never could. And so I would encourage you to check those people out. But from a biological perspective, we opened the whole show talking about the idea that I was pre-med in college. Logistically and scientifically, there is no such thing as a life of the mother reason to kill a child in her womb and then evacuate that child from her womb. Any good doctor would know that's actually wildly dangerous for the mother. That could put her life in jeopardy even further than what she might be living through. So a good OBGYN would deliver the child, would take care of the mother and the child as 2 separate patients. If it's too early and that child passes away, that's tragic, but that shouldn't preclude any medical intervention for saving that person. All of that being said, you're right. Rape, incest, life of the mother accounts for less than 1% of all abortions that happen in the United States. Millions upon millions every single year, even after Roe v. Wade was overturned. Look at states like Florida, where I live today, for example. There are standing provisions with exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, and even a fetal abnormality diagnosis, which I think we all could argue the morality of that. And after that, it's a 6-week cutoff. And everybody lost their minds in the media when Ron DeSantis was able to sign this into law. But when you actually study the polling, the idea between a 6-week ban and a 15 or 16-week ban polls exactly the same with American voters nationwide. So I don't know how I feel about this idea of a random week that we're coming up with. Why 16? I don't know. That's smack dab in the middle of the second trimester. That's actually quite more progressive than what many European countries have legalized for their abortion laws. But I think really where we can start to have this conversation on an important level, and what I'm trying to do on college campuses and through screens on social media every day, is not just the fight to make abortion illegal, but also to make it unthinkable culturally, to know that we all, moms and dads and babies alike, deserve so much better than the hollow lies of the abortion industry, than the death that accompanies it, not just for the babies, but putting moms' lives at risk every single day as well. And just from a human rights perspective, this is the biggest human rights issue of our time. So it demands moral clarity from our leadership.
So let me just ask you a final kind of question that I want to get at you. You know, you write in the book how Gen Z can save America. As we push forward to November, most political consultants and operatives who tell you the most reliable vote are seniors, right? They get out, they vote every time. The most unreliable voters are young people. You mentioned at the outset that they're trending, at least the Gen Zers are trending young men, trending more conservative. What do you portend their role in this upcoming election to be? Are they going to actually vote? And are there issues outside of what we just talked about that people should be aware of that said this is actually something that isn't getting touched on because, you 50, 60-year-old political consultants don't recognize how important X is to them?
For so long, I think it's been a bygone conclusion in the Republican Party that we all have this saying, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, then you have no heart. And if you're not a conservative by the time you're 50, then you have no brain. And it's funny because it's been true for the last several decades in the United States. But really, for the first time ever, I think that old rule, an old joke, has been thrown out the window because the entire playbook of American politics is fundamentally different in the 2020s than it has been for the last several centuries that we've been a country. You're right. Historically, it's been the old vote, the senior vote that is always the most reliable. It always turns out. And it was the biggest voter block that politicians had to go after to win. But for the first time this November, millennials with Gen Z are the largest voter block in the United States of America. And by the time we all grow up, most Gen Zers are still in high school. We, as one generation of 70 million people, will be the largest single voter block in American history. So I think the left has woken up to this reality, and they've been very effective in reaching young people by saying, your voice matters. Your vote matters. We care about issues we care about because it's going to make your life better in the future, even though they're just lying out of both ends to young people about what's going to make their life better and using them as political pawns. Whereas the right has said, young people don't matter. They'll come around eventually. You saw that in 2022 with already this tsunami of young voters really changing the electorate demographic with the highest youth voter turnout, second highest youth voter turnout in American history. And it wasn't quite as cut and dry to the blue side as you think it was. In fact, it was overwhelmingly more red for young people than a lot of people anticipated. But I think it's because the Republican Party was trying to convince people your wallet is on the ballot. You can't pay your bills. You can't afford your groceries. You can't fill up your gas tank. Whereas the left is trying to convince people your life is on the ballot. Women will literally die if we don't legalize abortion through all 9 months. You're going to literally die in your college classroom because of a mass shooter if you don't vote for the Democrat Party. Everybody's going to literally die in 10 years because the climate emergency is destroying the earth as we know it. So you have to vote Democrat. These social issues seem like an afterthought for the political right, but they are the forefront. They are the front lines of what this political fight looks like moving forward. That doesn't mean we all have to agree on 100% of how to tackle environmental issues or women's reproduction conversations and IVF or any of the controversial things, but we at least have to show up for the conversation and show up with moral clarity if we want to get the attention of young people. And last thing I'll say is this. There's this idea for whatever reason that young people today are too uneducated, they're too stupid, they're too lazy to really make a difference in American politics moving forward. And why that has come about, I think there's a million reasons, probably just that over half of our Congress has been there for longer than twice the time that Gen Z has been alive. And we've created this narrative that our founding fathers were the same, that they were these old, decrepit, sagging at the seams, geriatric white men that couldn't possibly build a future for America that would stand the test of time. But actually, doing my research for this book, most Americans, even politicians, don't know that on July 4th, 1776, most of our founding fathers were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. Thomas Jefferson on July 4th, 1776 was only 33 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. Our country's very founding is predicated on the involvement of young punk rock countercultural patriots sticking up to two powerful governments for the people to fight for liberty for the next generation to come. And if we exclude young voices from the conversation, if we don't inspire and empower them and give them a seat to take on the driver's seat of American culture, which will eventually fall on our shoulders, arguably I think it does today, then we will cease to exist of a country as we know it. So it's time for us to return to our true roots of what it means to be American patriots.
All right. Well, after hearing that Jefferson thing, I feel like a huge slacker now. So I'm going to go write something. Congratulations on the book, The End of the Alphabet, How Gen Z Can Save America. It's out tomorrow. Go to Amazon right now or wherever you go get your books. Order it. Let's show a little love and support Isabelle in this amazing endeavor and get to know a little bit more about this key demographic that we are going to count on this November. Congrats on the book. For everyone out there, we got a great week headed your way. Peter Schweitzer is going to be here later in the week to talk about what a threat to follow on this conversation that China really is. Dennis Prager joins us tomorrow. That's going to be great. And obviously Thursday, the big panel show. Thanks for all you do to subscribe to the show. Please continue to follow us on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Continue to show a little love by not just hitting that subscribe, but the notification button. We'll see you back here tomorrow with our friend, Dennis Prager. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.